Hello and happy Monday. It's Tuesday. It's what happens when we do an extra stream during the week. It gets me all the confusion. Guys, I am super excited for today. Today is the end of Nano. I don't know where November went, but someone should find it because I am not prepared for this.
It truly yeeted. It was like
it just yeeted itself off the calendar. I feel like it was just like
I thought
nope.
yesterday was Halloween.
Oh yes, we have all lost our ever-loving minds, and I am not even remotely close to my goal of writing 4 short stories in the month of November. That was cute that I thought that was going to happen. But it was still a good time, lots of stuff. We're super excited to have the wonderful Mackenzie Finkley back joining us after an absence, trudging through the sorrows of writing and all of the things. And before we kind of dive into everything, which just to kind of give you guys a brief overview, we are going to have our editing samples, and that is going to be fantastic. So we're going to be sharing some critiques there. If you guys who are watching have anything that you would like to have critiqued by us, the form is officially down below in the show notes. Make sure you go down and fill it out. Next Monday, it is wide open to people who want to get feedback from us. As you can see, or as you saw in the previous one yesterday, we don't shred each other's stuff apart. We look for the positive and the things that can be improved. So that is our goal as author coaches, is to basically help you guys figure out how to do what you do even better. So if you would like to have that kind of feedback, please make sure to go down and fill out that form. Super, super important. But before we dive into our writing sprints and the editing samples and the typical questions that we do, I want to give Mackenzie just a moment here to talk about, like, what have you been up to with all of this stuff? Like,
Spotlight on me?
on you.
Oh man, the question really is, what have I not been doing? Because a lot. I've been writing and working on making the Artifact Hunter awesome, and working on the draft and making sure that it's complete and the story is there. And then at the same time, been working on putting together all these marketing materials and bringing the community together. I'm going to say that word again, community, and enunciate, and get everyone excited for the fundraising campaign to fundraise the cost to publish the book, doing hybrid publishing, which we've talked about before. And very exciting. It's going well. And I've got, about 20 more days or so to reach my goal. And so I am like in it deep, friends.
Nice. Very, very exciting stuff. We'd love to see it. And especially because, like, I remember just from the brief bit that you had shared earlier, I think it was in October at that point, just a little bit about the Artifact Hunter and like what it is, all that good stuff. Like, I was super excited to hear about it. You taking the love of museums and then turning that into a fiction novel is just like, mwah, chef's kiss. So good. All right, so we are going to dive now into our questions. And then after that, we will do a writing sprint. After the writing sprint, we are going to make sure that Mackenzie has not been eaten by a rabid dog. And after that will be the editing samples, where you guys can see kind of get a taste of what it is that we're going to be doing and helping you guys with, should you submit in the form below. So we're going to put Vincent on the chopping block, as it were, and ask the question, how should a manuscript feel to the writer when it is ready to leave the desk and land with an editor?
Yes. Thank you for putting me on the chopping block. This question can go multiple different ways because there are multiple different editors. But ideally, if you're entering in with a developmental editor first, which is what we recommend, and we talked a little bit about it in the last live stream, and Steven actually has experience working as one, they are the editors who help you structurally get your book to where it needs to be to tell the best story with the best character arcs. So to get to that place where you can go to a developmental editor, you should ideally have a first draft done. And you should have also ideally looked over this first draft at least one time. And now not everybody has the same writing process going into it. I certainly didn't just write a clean draft right away. I don't recommend not doing that. I think it is a good idea to just, push through and write a first draft and get that done and then go to an editor. But I highly recommend going to a developmental editor first. Now, if you push wisdom to the side a little bit on that issue and go forward with a revisions editor first, or you do developmental editing yourself and you have experience with that and you get that done first, when should your manuscript go through the editing phase, as it's colloquially, I won't say that again, but you know what I'm trying to say, known? When do you hit that phase, and when does your manuscript feel ready for that? Well, that's what the developmental editing is for, and it's because your structure is there, your story is there within that structure, and your character arcs make sense and fit together. And once you get to that place, you're not necessarily going to know exactly when that is, but once you have those three elements together, then you're ready to edit things within that context. And I sort of thought of this last time, but I didn't get a chance to say it or formulate it. But your editor, your revisions editor at least, is sort of like a hairdresser, because you may think that you know your head the best because you look at it every single day, and you think, okay, I know how to cut it so that it's going to look right. But probably 9 times out of 10, that hairdresser that you're going to, who's cutting lots of different people's heads, is going to know what to do to best give you a good haircut. And you're going to build a relationship with them. And over the course of that editing process, your book is going to start to fill out, and your hairdresser will become more like a barber in that sense, at least in that sort of relationship. So I think that your manuscript will be ready for that once you have those fundamentals down of story and character and structure. And before you've waited too long to get stuck in a rut where you're just editing your own work and going back and looking through it, you need to get yourself into that next phase before you get trapped, which can happen. But
yep. And the key thing that you said there was get into a rut. Like, if you feel yourself in a rut or heading that way, that is when you need to turn it over to an editor and get some external feedback on your stuff. Because once you hit that rut, it's just the merry-go-round of insanity, and you don't really get anywhere. So I definitely second that. If you're heading for that, find an editor. And if you need one, if you have a question about them, message me, message any of us authors. Again, like, I run a group for editors who do developmental editing, copy editing, line editing, all of the editing. I can find somebody to send you to. So these are the resources that I have as an editor. The next person we are going to call up before we head into writing sprint numero uno is Emily, and asks, when editing a manuscript, how do you preserve the story's core and not leave it on the cutting floor?
Yeah, this is a really great question. And I think that Steven actually hit it home yesterday when he talked about the fact that a good editor doesn't tear your work to shreds. Keep in mind that, like, this applies to you too whenever you're going about just self-editing any part of your manuscript. Your goal isn't to just like completely pulverize your draft to dust. Instead, you more want to look for two very distinct things. I would say especially more so on like that first round of revisions right after drafting. And the first is what I call the gold that you can polish to a shine. The second is the coal that you can turn into a diamond. And so the gold is those places that they're relatively good. All of the major different kinds of elements of the story are there and they're working to a degree. They just need a little bit of polishing, a little bit of fine tuning to really kind of just come together and further the narrative as a whole. Then you have the coal. Those are the places that really at this point, they just exist. They're there, they're on paper. Maybe they check some of those elements of narrative, but really they're missing something crucial to the narrative itself. So maybe it's a character in a section that needs to be fleshed out a little bit more in a scene. Maybe it's a spot pacing feels off. Maybe it's a plot point that started off great, kind of just like went downhill from there, and you got to go back and kind of fix it, depending on how kind of the story unfolded. But it's like whatever pieces are, those spots where you want to be really intentional to kind of further the metaphor of applying the pressure. Those are the spots that you will probably hack at a bit more, hack away at. And often those are the you'll end up just cutting, and they'll probably be painful to cut. But in order to kind of tighten things and preserve the integrity of the story itself, it's really, really hard to be objective with anything that you're close to, especially if that thing is creative, such as writing a novel is. But being objective with your work is really the best way to make sure that you do right by both it and yourself.
Yeah. I think the contrast of like, there's going to be these gold nuggets and then there's just the lumps of coal.
Yep.
and then you have to work a little harder to get those ones fixed up. Yeah. I think that to just kind of echo that when you're looking at, I think one of the biggest ways to avoid leaving stuff on the cutting floor that is at the heart of the story is you actually have to finish the draft before you start editing.
Yes.
Finish the draft, know how the story ends. Because I kid you not, guys, when I finished the first draft, I immediately knew, oh, I got to fix all of these. And when I finished the second draft and I wrote the end, I immediately was like, oh, that chapter, nope, that's not going to work anymore. And it broke my heart because I had a talking cow and all of the beta readers loved the talking cow, loved it. It had to go. It hurt me in a special way. So those are the types of things, is that as soon as you've finished the draft and you actually look over the entire story, you get the entire story, and you'll be able to avoid actually losing those things that really should be there. All right, guys. So we are going to dive into our first writing sprint. And unlike yesterday, I actually remembered to turn on my writing software beforehand and share the screen. I mean, guys, like, I am on point today. Aside from spilling the kombucha all over my desk and most of my papers and the floor shortly before going live, aside from that, I am killing it. So we are going to get ready to dive in for our first 15-minute writing sprint. And then we are going to hop into the editing samples, which we have prepared, which is going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to switch that around. There we go. Okay, guys. Writing process is starting in 3, 2, 1. All right. First writing sprint officially in the bag.
What a sweet
What
little
did you-
bell sound.
I know, ding, ding, ding. Like we're all sophisticated and stuff, and it's like pff, silly little thing. All right, guys, what's the word count? What'd you get?
191. Not my best.
150.
134.
No
Did you
say.
get it? Did you get it? 260.
Wow.
Woo!
Dang.
I mean, when you're being chased by monsters that want to eat your eyeballs from your face,
Yeah.
like,
Motivation.
Yeah.
it's motivation to run really, really fast.
I will tell you that the climax of my last book was like the easiest part to write. You just sit down and you're like, and this, and then that, and then this, and then that, and then there was a gun, and then wow.
Awesome. All right. Love it. Now we are going to do the new thing. And cool enough, StreamYard has actually provided us with ways to upload slides directly. So I don't have to try and like share a screen and like have to take it down and put it. It's the little things in life, guys. I don't
Really
think you
fancy.
know.
Yeah.
So
It's good
fancy.
stuff. Okay, so editing samples. This is going to be fun, guys. So let me share the screen here. Ta-da!
Ooh,
Oh.
fancy.
Yeah. All
This
right,
is
so
polished. Like professionals.
I know it's almost like we know what we're doing, but don't let it fool you, y'all.
Almost.
Canva
Almost.
works wonders. I'm just saying, it's a miracle worker. All right, well, this is actually going to cut off this, so I'll just move this back over here. That'll make it a little bit easier. Okay, so this is our very own Emily Vanderbeent, and her current work in progress is either These Dark Shores or Of Sirens and Shipwrecks, both of which I love the titles of. So I would advise having both. Just make it one long title.
I'll see what I can do.
That'd be amazing. I love it. So this is Emily's. So Emily, why don't you read it to us, and then we will dive into the suggestions and critiques.
All right. The familiar sound of the docks filtered to Tamarin as she walked the labyrinthine streets of Lower Moroi. A gentle breeze tossed her curls like the sails of ships anchored in the harbor below. As lively as port was during the day, activity seemed to double as the sun slipped below the waves. Sailors spilled from ships on shaky legs as they unloaded cargo from corners of the realm Tamarin could only dream of seeing. Men and women alike carried crates, and the smell of the sea wrapped around them in a cologne of salt and fish. Those with the good fortune of making harbor earlier in the day drifted toward the tavern, seeking rum and release in equal measure. The docks were no place for a lady, but that was precisely why Tamarin loved them. Even on nights when Rook wasn't in port, she'd slip into taverns and make her home in the shadows of a corner booth to listen to the sailors' tales of far-off lands and pirates' narrow escapes and shipwrecks.
It's so pretty. I mean, shoot, Zara wasn't wrong when she said that it makes it really hard to critique stuff.
Sorry.
Dang it, Emily, try harder to suck.
I have a thought.
Hit me, Kenzie.
Yeah. So I really love your use of imagery, particularly when it comes to smell. And now I'm thinking, are there any sounds?
Oh, yeah. That's a good thought. Because this is going to be the opening of chapter 2.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, no, I like that. Slip that in a little earlier.
And you've got the breeze too. So you've got feeling, you've got smell. Rum could also almost be taste. And you're definitely getting visuals like the sun slipping in. So I feel like if you add sound, you're just going to wrap up the whole package.
Yeah.
Yep, I think that's a great point, and especially because you have a great setup with the familiar sounds of the docs.
Mm-hmm.
That's your easy lead into this is what the
What
sounds
familiar
sound
sounds?
like.
Yeah.
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 Sailors cussing, crates creaking, ships creaking, the lap of the water on the dock poles.
I'm writing
I
this.
think I think stuff like that would, to Mackenzie's point, absolutely add that feeling of just immersion. Because I mean, just reading that, like you are immediately immersed into Tamrin's world,
Mm-hmm.
and that will just take it to that whole next level.
Fictional seagulls. You could do fantasy seagulls squawking.
Yeah.
You could give them a fake name.
That's a good call.
World building.
Bagels.
I'm looking at the cologne. The cologne part reminds me of the last excerpt we did with yours, where it said the brine like cheap perfume, and it's a cool little callback between the two. I like the interplay. It's fun.
Love to see it.
Call it.
I mean,
bottle it and sell it as Old Salty rather than Old Spice.
There we go.
I mean, one quick thought that I had, just building off of, like, because Mackenzie and Stephen were sort of building off of how you've done an excellent job of building off of the five senses and perhaps imbuing sound a little bit more. As someone who has gushed over your work in the past and in the present as well, you do an excellent job of imbuing color into a lot of your description. And in this particular one, like this is just me being very like particular, but in my mind I'm like, there are so many ways I can imagine the sea dock. Is this sea dock like more like a blushing sunset? Is it more like pastel-y? Is it like dark and brooding? Like, I'm just trying to figure out what the tone of the dock is from like a color standpoint. That's the only, like, because I feel it like in the way that you're describing it, but that is just the one, like, that's another bit of imagery that I think would anchor it, because in a lot of your other work, you do, like, your color descriptions are just like, ooh, like jewel tones and awesomeness. So that is something I'd like to see in the scene as well.
Yeah, I like that. I love that thought, because I guess I didn't realize how much I do lean into color imagery until you just pointed it out to me, and now I'm like, that makes total sense.
Something else just popped out to me. In the sentence where you said men and women alike carry crates, and then later you said the docks were no place for a lady. I'm wondering if you're trying to make a distinction between Tamrin as a higher class person in this world versus the women who work at the docks, or if there's like what exactly you're implying or going for with that
Good
distinction.
catch.
Yeah, no, that is because you're exactly right. She is technically like a lady. She's a princess, everything like that. And so she's not supposed to be on the docks, and she's supposed to be separate from the women who are.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I need to make that distinction a little clearer.
Yeah,
No,
usually the ladies
Jasmine
working down at the
situation?
docks are not ladies.
Yes.
Historically speaking.
Yes.
But this is
Is it
fantasy, Stephen.
Is
Still.
is this like a Jasmine in the marketplace scene? Is there a parallel there?
Kind of. Yes, with a twist.
Yes.
Kyra
love
coming
to
in
hear
clutch
it.
with the Disney references.
I was just gonna say, I'm like, leave it to Kyra to find the Disney reference.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
It is with a twist.
Mhm. I imagine so.
I think one thing that that comes to mind for me, and this is something that I try to take into consideration with my own writing, is what is the season currently? Because the colors of sunset also will be affected by the colors of the season. And so knowing whether it's summer, spring, winter, fall, that will give a whole different dynamic to how you decide to play up this scene. It'll affect the colors, it'll affect the smells, you know, what people are
mood.
wearing, the mood. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. All right, and we'll do our second one here real quick, and then we'll go into writing sprint number 2. So let's have our. I'm assuming this was from the artifact,
Yes.
Mackenzie.
Woo!
That was the
Yes.
only one that I was aware of.
That's a yes, sneak peek. That is a correct assumption.
Oh yeah, lucky guess for the win.
This is
All
the
right.
draft. Please be kind.
All right, everybody, let's get ready. All right, Mackenzie, lead it off. Serenade us.
Oh, I forgot which part I picked. Okay, you guys. All right. It felt like some kind of fever dream. I was standing there in the dark when the world around me began to spin, and I was being pushed toward the earth. It was like that feeling you get after one too many cups of punch at a frat party mixed with someone dropping a queen-size mattress on you. As all of this happened, the world around me was completely silent in a way that was absolutely deafening. You don't realize the ambient noise you live with every day until it's completely gone. No hum of the AC, no crackling of the ductwork in the ceiling, no shuffling of papers, nothing. It made me want to vomit. But how could I when I could hardly breathe? When I began to wonder if I was dying, it all suddenly stopped. The elephant was lifted from my chest and I gasped for air. Although I could not see a damn thing, I knew everything was different. The air that filled my lungs did not feel crisp. It did not smell of floor wax and sanitizing mist. The air was musty and kind of smelled like the spine of a really old book. The smell was my only comfort to cope with the absolute shock my body was in.
Whoa.
Mm.
I love.
So did an elephant actually sit on her or him?
No.
Pretty sure she'd be dead, Vincent.
Needs to make that distinction.
I mean, it is magical realism. The rules of physics can be broken. I mean, valid question.
Fair assessment.
This is
Yeah, this is more of a praise than like a critique, but it's really hard to take such a small moment and like do it justice. And you do a really good job of piling all of these things on top of each other that we feel it. We feel the mattress, we feel the punch, like the silence that is deafening, like the way that you layer them on top of each other and draw out such a small moment works really, really well because that's really hard to do.
Yeah,
Well,
I
thank you.
agree. Those small moments, being able to draw them out so that way the reader can really feel the weight or the emotion of what the character is feeling is not something that is typically done well, because then it turns into this monstrosity of like a 500 word long paragraph of like all of the things. And this is something that is, you know, I would say probably close to, just judging from the size, about 120 words for the paragraph, which I think is like, it's right up there at the max that I typically recommend for a paragraph. And it never feels like it gets to the point of being belabored. Like, I'm not just like, good God, let the paragraph end.
Stop describing stuff.
Right. It doesn't feel like that. And all of the descriptions are things that, you know, are tangible. You know, like the sealing wax, for those who have dealt with that stuff, they know what that smells like. The smell of a musty old book, you know, the weight of a mattress, like those things, like who hasn't had a mattress fall on top of them? So I think that pulling together all of those things is really, really nice. Because if honestly, if that top paragraph was any longer, it'd be too much.
Yeah.
I think it ends it right at the perfect moment.
All right, Kyra, what are you thinking?
She's trying to find a Disney reference.
I mean,
But the frat party's throwing her off.
I think something that I'm thinking about, just because ultimately the questions that are stirring in my head are where this is positioned in the broader chapter or paragraph, as to like how is the transition or hinge being facilitated? Is this
This is
like
the
more
chapter opening.
okay. Because yeah, I was wondering about that, because in my mind, this is a very strongly contextualizing hinge moment, and I don't want to like give away too much of your book, but like there are
You
some
guessed correctly.
there are some elements where I'm like, because you do use the example of too many cups of punch at a frat party, so we know your main character is in college, so I guess like, and that this happens in a city, so I think that there are the two questions that I have after reading this, but then again, you might answer them in the broader context of the chapter, would be, is this written in the perspective of your main character, where she's just now reflecting on it happening to her, or is it more removed in time, or it's more flashbacky? Because I feel like the way this is written, it could be both temporally. So that's one question that I have. The other question that I have, just from like and this is just me gushing because your character and I have the same alma mater, if like maybe you could incorporate like for example, the punch at frat parties at our school is called jungle juice.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that could just be like a small detail, but then again, only people who are familiar with the school would know that. So like,
No,
that's
it's
just, like,
used
a
at
very
lots of
small
universities, so I think that's a nice detail.
But I think that those were the two questions that I had. But like everybody else was saying, you did an excellent job of imbuing a lot into that small moment. Yeah, excellently done. So
Yes,
I
this
guess
is the chapter opener to chapter 9. So
oh, okay.
Nice. All right. Well, I think that we've had two excellent editing samples. So again, if you guys want us to do exactly what we've did, good Lord, done here. If we've done did here and you liked it, fill out that done dear form down there. Oh man, it's a week, guys. It's a week. Fill out the form,
it's
and we will
Tuesday.
do this for you guys as well. Which this is what we love to do. Like, we love to give encouragement and feedback and help you guys find those good points and to pull them out and make them brighter. So we are going to dive in to our next writing sprint, and then after we get back from that, Kyra will be on deck for answering questions. So let us go ahead and dive into this. I'm going to pull that back up. And on your marks, get set, go. Oh boy. Finished up another 15 minutes. All right, guys. What did you get for your word count?
Like 80. That was 15 minutes. Like, I'm convinced that you set the timer for a shorter amount of time.
Yeah, you know me. Just trying to mess with you guys.
I got my
206.
best yet. Oh, nice. Would you say 206?
Yeah.
Very nice. Vincent, what'd you get?
Got my best yet at 312.
Nice.
That's so cool. Fun fact, that's my birthday.
No way.
Yes.
Wow.
That's funny.
Very nice. You almost beat me, Vincent. Almost.
crap.
344, y'all.
No way.
Wow.
Yeah.
On a roll.
Oh, wow.
Monster, or
Inspired.
yeah, eyeball eating monsters, man, brings out the creativity in all of us. Good stuff. All right. Well, hopefully you viewers have been hitting your word counts and are getting close to your nano goal of the 50,000 words. I'm about 40,000 words off the pace, so there's always next year. But now we are going to get Kyra in on things here. Kyra, can you explain your fact-checking process?
Ooh.
I think this is such a fascinating question, particularly as it pertains to fiction work, because it depends on, because fact can mean a variety of things. Fact, particularly as we're interfacing with, historical fiction and historical fantasy authors here, and I love their expertise on this as well. But as somebody who works in speculative fiction and magical realism more predominantly, fact can pertain to like actual accuracy pertaining to like real world factual research for a sense of world building continuity, but fact can also pertain to, again, world building continuity that you come up with, because if there's like a disconnect in the development of a world, readers are going to pick up on that. Like if you say in one section that the sky like in this part of your world is always purple, and then all of a sudden you describe it as orange, unless you justify why it's orange, like it's a Pompeii situation, then like people are going to be confused. So the way I go about my fact checking process, and I tend to bring this up a lot when I have the privilege of being on these streams, but for me, again, the dichotomy of character driven and plot driven doesn't really exist, because again, all great books have strong components of both of them. But for me, when I go about my fact checking process when it comes to editing, it depends on, I guess, if I'm going to use the dichotomy, whether I consider myself consider the book to be more character driven or plot driven. So with my first book, The Wing of the Day, it was definitely more plot driven, but that plot was articulated in terms of the characters. So to go about making sure all the facts were consistent, I said, okay, what are things that I said I definitely wanted to assert about the character, and are those characteristics consistent throughout? Like, did I make sure that I described this character in relation to their hair? Hair was a big fixation point for me because that is a very important part of the characterization of my characters. So I think that in a more plot-driven book, I focus on making sure that the details surrounding the characters were consistent, because for me, that also informed the development of the setting, because really that kind of checked against the plot development. Whereas in my current book, which is a little bit Azara Blaze, which is a little bit more character driven, now as I kind of start to begin editing like ever so lightly, I'm thinking about the continuity of the plot a bit more, or the fact checking of the plot, where it's to say, because right now my book has a lot of flashbacks, so does this timeline make sense in the midst of my flashbacks? So I think that fact checking, you have to decide put your facts into categories. What is actually has to be pressed up against research, especially if you're doing historical or realistic fiction. So there's that category of fact. And there's the category of fact that falls into world building. And then you have to consider what aspects of your book are more character driven, what aspects of your book are more plot driven, and which details do you have to keep consistent for the sake of your readers trusting you. Because the other thing about fact checking being important is that sometimes you want for the rules to be broken. But if you're not consistent in what those rules are, then your readers are not even going to notice that they're broken. Like, there's a reason why you establish those facts from the outset so that the plot components have more of an effect. So yeah, I think that the easiest example that I used was the whole purple sky, orange sky thing, because you got to make a point of the fact that the sky is purple and be consistent about that, and then be like, oh wait, the sky is orange now. What? Pompeii? That kind of thing.
Yeah, no, and like just all of that, in addition to like when I was having to go through my revisions process for the City of Snow and Stars, I realized at a couple of moments I had called attention to the clothing, and I was like, wait a minute. Was that the same a little while ago? Or were their eyes that color a little while ago? And then I'm like thumbing through. I'm like, yep, I had remembered correctly. But I had to double check. I had to double check my travel times, which is a huge thing that people miss, particularly in fantasy, because they're like, people can just magically move across maps and great distances. Like, no, that is not actually a thing unless you've established it in your world. But yeah, the ones that I find the most irritating in particular are the little boogery details, like clothing. Did they have a dagger on their belt in the last scene or even a couple chapters ago? If so, why is it not here now? Did they misplace it like we do with our car keys? How did that happen? Like, who knows? And then you got to go back and you got to make those corrections, or at least give a reasonable answer for why they no longer have the thing.
There's another layer to this too, which is genre expectations. For example, when you're writing historical fiction, just because it's made up doesn't mean you don't need to fact check, because historical fiction readers, Emily knows this, like they will come for your neck if you are not consistent with what happened in the past or what history records has happened in the past in terms of like, not necessarily what happened, right? You can play with that a little bit, but when it comes to like, what were they wearing? What technology existed? Unless you've established that this is like historical fantasy in a completely alternate world that's not like ours, you're going to have to do some research and you're going to have to check some facts. Another example of this is like when I thought about how I wanted to incorporate time travel into my book. I did some research. There are really only a certain number of ways that you can do time travel, like logistically, even though it's not real. There's really only a certain number of ways you can do it. So making sure you're fact checking in that regard is too. But yeah, just because it's fiction and not nonfiction doesn't mean you don't need to fact check.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely critical.
Yeah. To a degree, like as Kyra said, fact is what you make it. There's obviously, like Mackenzie said, the genre expectation. So if you're writing a medical drama and someone loses X amount of blood, then like you got to know what that means and what that consequence will be and all the dominoes going from there. But yeah, you have a certain amount of leeway to play with. Just understand what the rules are and what that box is that you're playing within.
Yep. Vincent, any other thoughts on that one?
No, just the word verisimilitude or something like that. I remember that is the rule that you set in your book. I don't know how to pronounce it. I heard it somewhere, but I'm going to repeat it anyway. Verisimilitude.
That's a big word that I will now have to look up because I am not that well educated. Zara might know what that means, but it sounds like foreign language to me.
It sounds
could be saying it totally
Nietzsche
wrong.
or Montaigne. I'm gonna look it up now. I'm intrigued.
See, I didn't fact check it, so
The
I broke my own.
appearance being true or real.
This is why our viewers can't have nice things. We're not even fact checking the.
Just
Wow,
found
this is a good word. Example, the detail gives the novel some verisimilitude.
it is. Yes, I'm glad.
Look at that.
I'm gonna add that to my vocabulary to make myself
Word of the
sound more
day.
intelligent than I really am.
We all have to figure out how to work it into our works in progress.
Yeah, fantasy names are hard enough as it is. Adding in real world language only furthers to confuse people because they're like, that's not a word. Like, Google disagrees with you. Google determined that was a lie. All right, guys. Well, we have come to the end of yet another fantastic stream and to the end of November. Again, how we're at the end of November is beyond me. That being said, what you guys have to look forward to in December, there's only going to be 3 streams. The week after Christmas, we are not going to be doing a stream because as much as we love you, we do like our families. So we'll be Kara's thinking maybe. But we're going to be taking that week off to refresh ourselves, beautify ourselves, and then be back to, kick butt or chew gum in the new year. And frankly, we can't afford gum anymore. So it's just left to that. It's going to be great times. But through December, we are doing the editing without mercy. This is actually a phrase that we stole from Mackenzie Finkley. So thanks to her.
Great artist steal. I found it somewhere else.
Yeah, so we stole from she stole from somebody, we stole from there. So pass it along. It's a good
there it
time.
is. Look at that. Right on
Look
the
at
poster.
Dang, look at that. Now I have to have a coaster. Like anyway. But we are going to be walking you guys through how to do some self-editing. We'll actually have a coaching panel about that, which I'm really excited about. I'll get to be talking about some developmental editing tips that I have for you guys. I know I've kind of touched on them, but I'll be able to go in a little bit more detail on that stream, and some other general tips for revising, some guidance on how you move through December and start revising your stuff. And again, if you guys are interested, that all kind of builds up to February, where you have the opportunity to submit your manuscript. See what I did there? To New Degree Press. So again, hybrid publisher, crowdsourcing model. This is how we've all published and done so successfully. So if that is something that is of interest to you guys, also feel free to reach out to the emails, which are down in the show notes below. And we're happy to talk with you about that kind of stuff. If you have any questions, that's what we do. So I look forward to seeing everybody next Monday for our first editing stream. And we'll actually be doing editing sprints that we are working on. I don't have anything to edit, so mine will be writing sprints. But if y'all have something to edit, work on editing. It's going to be a good time. So everybody, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. And we look forward very much to seeing you guys next Monday. So have a wonderful rest of the week. Take care, guys.